On the evening of March 13th, 1997, thousands of people across Arizona looked up at the same sky. What they witnessed would become one of the most widely reported mass sighting events in American history. They were not all describing the same thing. The first event, a V-shaped formation of lights moving silently across the state, traveled approximately 300 miles from the Nevada border through Phoenix toward Tucson. Several witnesses, including Tim Lay, later said the lights appeared connected by a dark structure that obscured the stars as it passed overhead. The second event, a row of stationary lights hovering southwest of Phoenix, was filmed by dozens of witnesses and broadcast on local television. The United States Air Force later said those lights were LUU series illumination flares, dropped by A-10 aircraft during a training exercise at the Barry M. Goldwater Range. That explanation accounts for the second event. It does not account for the first. The governor of Arizona held a press conference. He brought a man in an alien costume. He laughed. 10 years later, he said he saw it too. One night, two events, one mystery that became two different investigations. This is Case File 003. March 13th, 1997 was a Thursday evening in Arizona. Comet Hale-Bopp had become one of the brightest comets visible from Earth in decades. Across Arizona, many people were already looking up. Whether that contributed to the number of witnesses that night is impossible to know. It certainly meant more eyes were on the sky. At 7:55 p.m., a witness in Henderson, Nevada, near the Arizona border, reported seeing a large V-shaped object traveling southeast. He estimated its apparent size to be comparable to a Boeing 747. 6 lights on its leading edge, and a sound he compared to rushing wind. At 8:15 p.m., an unidentified former police officer in Paulden, Arizona, approximately 200 miles southeast of Henderson, reported a cluster of reddish-orange lights disappearing over the southern horizon. He returned home. He watched through binoculars until they were gone. He reported no sound. Within minutes, calls began reaching local law enforcement and Luke Air Force Base. From Chino Valley, Prescott Valley, Dewey, Cordis Junction, all reporting the same formation, moving south. At approximately 8:17 p.m., callers in Prescott Valley began reporting something specific. Several said the lights appeared connected by a solid structure. Others described the object as blocking out portions of the starry sky as it passed overhead. Among the witnesses in Prescott Valley that night, Tim Lay, his wife Bobby, their son Hal, and their grandson Damien. They had first noticed 5 separate lights approximately 65 miles away, appearing, in Lay's account, like lights on top of a balloon. Over the next 10 minutes, as the formation moved toward them, the lights changed shape. They took on the form of an upside-down V. Then the Lay family could make out something else. A shape, like a carpenter's square, with the 5 lights set into it. 1 at the front, 2 on each side. It passed over the street where they lived, approximately 100 to 150 feet above them. Moving so slowly it appeared to hover. It made no sound. The Kaiser family, also in Prescott Valley, watched the same formation through binoculars for approximately 2 to 3 minutes. John Kaiser described the lights as forming a triangular pattern, all red, except the light at the nose, which was distinctly white. The object passed directly over them. It banked to the right and disappeared to the southeast. No sound. 2 families, the same Prescott Valley sky, the same formation, the same silence. Different descriptions of its precise shape and color. That inconsistency will matter later. By 8:30 p.m., The formation had reached the Phoenix metropolitan area. Entire neighborhoods stepped outside. Families paused dinner. Drivers pulled over. As the formation continued south, police switchboards and Luke Air Force Base began receiving hundreds of calls. Among those approaching Sky Harbor Airport that evening, a licensed pilot flying his son into Phoenix. He saw 6 lights over the airport, in absolute uniform, in a V shape. According to Russell, he radioed the control tower and reported unidentified flying objects on approach. The tower replied that nothing appeared on radar. He landed. He put it out of his mind. He didn't realize until 2 years later that he had inadvertently become part of one of the most widely reported aerial events in American history. That pilot was Kurt Russell. The formation continued south. It was reported over Tucson by approximately 8:45 p.m. Then over the Mexican state of Sonora before sightings ceased. The entire transit, from Henderson, Nevada to the southern edge of Arizona, covered approximately 300 miles, in approximately 50 minutes. What those witnesses reported remains the subject of competing explanations. But one person was watching with something the others didn't have: a telescope. His account becomes important in Chapter 3. Shortly before 10 p.m., a second phenomenon appeared over the Phoenix metropolitan area. Distinct from the V-shaped formation reported earlier that evening, a row of bright, stationary lights hovering southwest of the city near the Sierra Estrella Mountains. Unlike the earlier overflight, this event was filmed. Multiple Phoenix residents captured the lights on home video cameras. The footage was broadcast on local television. It became the visual most people associate with the Phoenix lights. That matters, because the most widely circulated footage came from the part of the case that was later attributed to military flares. The lights appeared one by one. They held position in a loose arc southwest of the city. Then, one by one, they disappeared. Some witnesses near the Sierra Estrella Mountains reported hearing distant sounds, described as thunder or explosions, from that direction. Phoenix media outlets began receiving hundreds of calls. Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood, the only elected official in Arizona to formally investigate the sightings, later said she received more than 700 reports from residents. Luke Air Force Base also received a large number of public calls that evening. In a letter issued in May 1997, the base stated that no Luke aircraft had been involved and that it had not told the media the lights were flares. The official explanation did not arrive immediately. 4 months later, in July 1997, the Arizona Republic reported that members of the Maryland Air National Guard had been responsible for the later lights. In 2007, Maryland Air National Guard pilot Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones confirmed publicly that he had flown one of the aircraft participating in the flare exercise that night. His squadron, the 104th Fighter Squadron, had been deployed to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base for Operation Snowbird. That evening, they flew training missions over the Barry M. Goldwater Range. The flares, LUU-2B/B illumination flares, were dropped from A-10 aircraft at approximately 10,000 feet. Each descended beneath a parachute, burning for several minutes, to illuminate ground targets. Independent analyses, including a reconstruction by Phoenix television station KPNX, showed that flare drops beyond the Sierra Estrella Mountains closely reproduced the geometry and staggered disappearances seen in the recordings. From Phoenix, the flares appeared to remain stationary. As they descended, the mountains gradually obscured them, causing the lights to disappear one at a time. The later event has a documented military explanation: a confirmed pilot, a confirmed squadron, a confirmed training exercise, and independent analysis consistent with the recorded footage. Many researchers, including some who remain unconvinced about the earlier sightings, accept that the 10 p.m. lights were military flares. But there is an important limitation. The flare exercise began at approximately 10 p.m. Reports of the earlier V-shaped formation began shortly before 8 p.m., more than an hour earlier. By this point, the evidence had separated into two categories: video evidence and witness testimony. They did not point to exactly the same conclusion. The confirmed flare explanation accounts for the later stationary lights. It does not account for what witnesses reported earlier that evening. Whether those earlier reports describe aircraft, a single structured object, or something else entirely, is where the investigation begins. By the end of March 13, 1997, two distinct events had been reported over Arizona. They had different witnesses, different timings, different behavior, and as the investigation developed, different explanations. The second event, the stationary lights filmed over Phoenix, has a documented explanation supported by a named pilot, a confirmed training exercise, and independent video analysis. Most investigators, regardless of their position on the broader case, accept this conclusion. The first event is different. One explanation proposed after the event was that the earlier V-shaped formation consisted of A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft returning to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base after a training sortie. Flying in formation, at high altitude. Their navigation lights, viewed from the ground at night, creating the appearance of a structured object. This explanation is plausible. A-10 aircraft returning to Tucson from the north, on that route, at that altitude, would have been consistent with the direction of travel reported. But the Air Force has never confirmed which specific aircraft flew that formation. No official investigation was ever conducted into the earlier sightings. No pilots have come forward to confirm they flew the V formation, unlike the second event, where Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones confirmed his role on the record. There is one witness to the first event who did not rely on naked eye observation. Mitch Stanley, a 21-year-old amateur astronomer living in Scottsdale, was outside that night with a 10-inch Dobsonian telescope. His eyepiece produced approximately 43 times magnification. Unlike nearly every other witness, Stanley observed the formation through magnified optics rather than with the naked eye. When the formation passed over, he looked through the telescope. He later described what he saw clearly: individual aircraft with square-shaped wings flying in formation. He told his mother, who was standing beside him, what he was seeing. He said, "Planes. There's no way I could have mistaken that." Stanley's observation is the only direct optical evidence, produced through magnified optics, that is consistent with the aircraft formation explanation for the first event. It is a significant data point. It is also a single data point. Against it sits a different category of evidence: the testimony of hundreds of witnesses who described not separate lights, but a single structured object, a solid mass, moving silently, blocking out stars. Several witnesses, including Tim Lay and his family, described a structured object in consistent terms across their account. Several Phoenix police officers later reported seeing what they described as a large, dark, triangular object with lights at its points and no audible sound. One explanation that has been proposed for the perception of solidity is a phenomenon known as illusory contours. This is the tendency of the human eye to perceive connected shapes between unconnected points of light. Illusory contours have been proposed as one possible explanation for why separate lights might be perceived as a single structured object. This is a documented perceptual effect. It does not require any unusual explanation. What it does not fully address is silence. If the aircraft were at high altitude, the lack of sound becomes less surprising. But several witnesses, including Tim Lay, estimated the object passed only about 100 to 150 feet overhead. If those altitude estimates were accurate, silence becomes much harder to reconcile. There is one more piece of this record to examine. The FAA maintained radar data from Sky Harbor Airport covering the period of the first event. That data was never requested. Under standard FAA retention protocols, radar records are routinely deleted after 2 weeks if no formal request has been filed. No request was filed within that window. The radar data for the first event no longer exists. Not destroyed, not classified. Simply never requested in time. What the radar data would have shown is unknown. Luke Air Force Base told investigators that a formation of aircraft flying at high altitude above Sky Harbor's airspace would not have been considered unusual and would not necessarily have generated an alert. That does not confirm a formation was there. It also does not confirm one was not. The historical record does not resolve that contradiction. It preserves it. One observer saw aircraft through a telescope. Hundreds of others reported what they believed was a single structured object. The historical record contains both. On the morning of June 19, 1997, 3 months after the sightings, Governor Fife Symington appeared on Arizona television. He announced he was ordering a state investigation. He said he intended to make, in his words, all the necessary inquiries. We're going to get to the bottom of this. That afternoon, he called another press conference. His chief of staff, Jay Hyler, was escorted into the room by public safety officers. Hyler wore a large rubber alien mask. The governor introduced him as the guilty party. As the room laughed, Symington told reporters, "This just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious." The press conference became one of the most remembered moments associated with the Phoenix Lights. Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood, who had called for a formal investigation, later said no state investigation ever interviewed witnesses or attempted to reconstruct the earlier reports. At the time, another story was unfolding. 1 year earlier, in June 1996, Symington had been indicted on federal charges including bank fraud and making false financial statements. When the June 1997 press conference took place, those proceedings were still ongoing. In September 1997, he was convicted on 7 counts of bank fraud. Those convictions were later overturned on appeal. He ultimately received a presidential pardon in 2001. 10 years later, Symington returned to the subject. In a series of interviews during 2007, he said he had also witnessed the first event. According to Symington, he watched a massive V-shaped object move silently across the sky. As both a licensed pilot and a former Air Force officer, he said it was unlike any aircraft he recognized. He later said, "It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery. A lot of people saw it, and I saw it too." Symington also said he had contacted Luke Air Force Base, the Arizona National Guard, and the Department of Public Safety, looking for answers. According to Symington, none of them could explain what he had seen. Not everyone accepted his later account. Retired Air Force pilot and astronomer James McGahey, who concluded the sightings were consistent with military aircraft and flares, argued that Symington's personal conviction did not outweigh the available evidence. The governor's account, and McGahey's criticism, remain part of the historical record. Neither resolved what witnesses reported during the first event. What the record establishes is that the governor of Arizona witnessed something on March 13, 1997, said nothing publicly for a decade, and when he did speak, described something he could not explain. Why he chose not to say so at the time is a question only he could fully answer. On March 13, 1997, two distinct events were reported over Arizona. They produced thousands of witness accounts, conflicting physical descriptions, a confirmed military explanation for one event, and no publicly documented official resolution for the other. What follows is what the historical record can establish, what it cannot resolve, and what it cannot answer. Documented. Two distinct events were reported over Arizona on March 13, 1997. Thousands of people across the state reported unusual lights. The later stationary lights, observed at approximately 10 p.m., have been attributed to military illumination flares, supported by a named pilot's account, an identified squadron, and a confirmed training exercise. Independent video analysis has shown the footage of those lights is consistent with flare behavior. Governor Fife Symington publicly mocked the incident at a press conference on June 19, 1997. In 2007, Symington publicly stated he had witnessed the earlier event. FAA radar data covering the period of the first event was not requested within the retention window and no longer exists. No publicly documented official investigation resolving the first event has been found. Contested. Whether the earlier V-shaped formation consisted of a structured craft or a formation of conventional aircraft remains disputed. Whether witness reports of a solid structure between the lights reflected a physical object or a perceptual effect such as illusory contours has not been resolved. Whether the formation was at high altitude, consistent with aircraft and reduced sound, or at low altitude, as several witnesses estimated, creating an unresolved silence problem, is debated. How much evidentiary weight should be given to Symington's later testimony is a matter of disagreement among researchers. Unknown. What the FAA radar data would have shown is unknown. Which aircraft, if any, corresponded to the earlier V-shaped reports has not been publicly established. What specifically produced the earlier sightings, whether aircraft, a structured object, or something else entirely, cannot currently be determined from the surviving record. The Phoenix Lights remain one of the most extensively documented mass sighting events in the United States. The historical record preserves two events. The second event has a supported explanation. The first event does not. Between those two facts, the investigation remains open. Subscribe for the next investigation.